Welcome back. My name is Steve Kirby, and in this video, we will begin discussing what Islam teaches about Muslims taking an oath. Get ready for some eye-opening information. According to Islamic doctrine, an oath is only validly effected if sworn by a name of Allah Most High or an attribute of His entity. This means that for an oath to be valid under Islam, it must be sworn in the name of Allah or in the name of one of His attributes, such as the All-Merciful or the Knower of the Unseen. So when a Muslim swears an oath to support the U.S. Constitution and ends that oath by stating the words, "So help me God," is that Muslim actually swearing that oath in the name of Allah, the God of Islam? To answer that question, we need to start off with the fact that Christianity played a significant role in the early development of the United States. In his article, "Did America Have a Christian Founding?" Dr. Mark David Hall wrote that the founders, quote, identified themselves as Christians, were influenced in important ways by Christian ideas, and generally thought it appropriate for civic authorities to encourage Christianity, unquote. During the 19th century, the United States continued as a predominantly Christian nation, and in the middle part of that century, actions were taken by the federal government that emphasized that fact. For example, it was during this time period that the motto, "In God We Trust," was placed on United States coins, largely because of the increased religious sentiment existing during the Civil War. This idea was initiated by an 1861 letter from a Protestant minister to the Secretary of the Treasury. And in 1862, the U.S. Congress added the word, "So help me God," to the federal oaths of office. These words were added during a time of increased Christian religious sentiment. Is there any support for the idea that when these words were added, the word God was also meant to include the Muslim God Allah? The answer is no, because the God of Christians and Jews and Islam's God Allah are not the same. For instance, here is some of what Allah has to say in the Quran about Christians and Jews. Allah states that the only religion acceptable to Him is Islam. Christians and Jews are disbelievers. Jews are among the worst enemies of Muslims. Allah curses Christians and Jews. Allah states that those who believe that Allah had a son, meaning the Christians, commit the one unforgivable sin in Islam, shirk. Allah states that those who commit shirk will go to hell. Allah states that Christians and Jews are among the worst of creatures and will abide in the fire of hell. Allah specifically forbids Muslims from being friends with Christians and Jews, and instead commands Muslims to fight Christians and Jews. Christianity is considered a false religion based on a fraud, because Allah states that Jesus was not crucified, but it only appeared so. Islam teaches that Allah took Jesus bodily into paradise and made one of Jesus's disciples look like Jesus. It was that disciple who was crucified. So Muslims who know their religion look at a crucifix or a painting of the crucifixion and see an impostor hanging on the cross. And of course, if there was no crucifixion, there was no resurrection. So Islam teaches that Christianity is a false religion based on a fraud. Taking into consideration the religious environment of 19th century America, there is no support for any claim that during a period of increased Christian religious sentiment, the word God that was then applied to oaths and stamped on coins would include the deity of a separate religion that was openly hostile to Christians and Jews. But what if Muslims claim that when they swear to support the Constitution and end by saying the word, "So help me God," in their oath, they are personally referring to Allah, the God of Islam? In the first place, Muslims are generally advised against using any other word than Allah when referring to the God of Islam. Consider this from the Islam Question and Answer website. But what the Muslim should use in his worship and all other circumstances when referring to Allah is the word Allah as it is, because that has become a symbol for the Muslims and something that distinguishes them, and it helps to avoid any confusion between what they mean and what others mean when they say God, as others may sometimes be referring to Allah, but sometimes they may be referring to something else. When offering dua, praying to Allah, or swearing oaths, he has to avoid doing that with words other than the known Arabic words for the divine names and attributes as they are confirmed in the Quran and Sunnah. The Sunnah consists of the teachings and example of Muhammad. So according to this ruling, Muslims are supposed to use the name Allah instead of God in order to differentiate themselves from what non-Muslims mean when those non-Muslims say God, and this applies to swearing an oath. This underlines again the fact that Allah is not the same as the God of Jews and Christians. In the second place, there are many tenets of Islamic doctrine that are in direct conflict with the US Constitution. This conflict is exacerbated by the fact that the Constitution consists of laws that were written by men, and Islamic doctrine teaches that the laws of Allah, and by extension the teachings and example of Allah's Prophet Muhammad, are always superior to man-made laws if there is a conflict. And it is a matter of major disbelief, kufra, for a Muslim to enact or follow man-made laws that are in conflict with the laws of Allah. Here's a 2010 ruling on this issue. Promulgating man-made laws that are contrary to the rulings of Allah and His Messenger concerning matters of blood, honor, and wealth is an act of major kufra, which puts one beyond the pale of Islam. There is no doubt whatsoever concerning that, and there is no difference of opinion concerning it among the Muslim scholars. So how can a Muslim swear to Allah, the God of Islam, that he will support a man-made document that in large part is in direct conflict with many of the teachings and commands of Allah? This means that when Muslim public officials swear to support the US Constitution, and in that oath with the words, "So help me God," they are in reality giving that oath to the Judeo-Christian God, not Islam's Allah. So according to Islamic doctrine, that oath is therefore neither valid nor binding on the Muslim making it. In the previous video, we saw how Islam allows Muslims to deceive non-Muslims. In the next video, we will see how those teachings about deception can actually be applied when it comes to a Muslim making an oath. I encourage you to post this video series on social media and tell your friends in conservative groups about these videos. Just because there are some who want to ignore Islam doesn't mean that Islam will ignore them. Thank you, and I look forward to being with you again soon.